Thank you very much, Minister de Norberger. Good afternoon, members of the media, wider viewing and listening public of Trinidad and Tobago. I'm here today to address a number of immigration matters, and they're really broken into two categories. The first is, I saw today's Express editorial where, unfortunately, it was quoting one side of a story and jumping into an arena without getting the facts from the other side. Let me assure the population of Trinidad and Tobago, so I'm here today really to clarify and to make sure that the facts are known to the public. And the editorial was about deportation of illegal immigrants, Venezuelans, and certain lawyers going to court to try to get orders of stays to stop the deportation of individuals. And there was a suggestion on allegation that the state did not abide by any orders granted by the court staying deportations, and persons were deported in variance with orders of the court. First of all, I'd like to assure the population of Trinidad and Tobago that this government is committed to doing everything in accordance with the law and in accordance with due process. Also, as we've said time and time again, and as I have said time and time again as the Minister of National Security in particular, no one is above the law. Thirdly, all repatriations of Venezuelans within the last few months have been done in complete accordance with the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. All of them have been done, including the most recent. I'd like to remind the population that one of the cries we hear constantly, and understandably, especially in the middle of a global pandemic that is COVID-19, is with respect to border security and keeping our borders closed. So if you're keeping your borders closed, it means that you have to deal with illegal immigrants and persons illegally entering your borders in a certain manner and a certain fashion. Before we get to the pandemic, that, as you are aware, from March of this year, March 23rd, we closed our borders to both nationals and non-nationals. I'd like to deal with the issue of illegal immigrants. Even before the COVID pandemic, we have a policy here in Trinidad and Tobago, a domestic law, that with respect to illegal immigrants, we deal with them in accordance with the Immigration Act, and that is what we've continued to do. As things worsened in Venezuela not too long ago, over the last few years, we are all aware that there began a migration of Venezuelans to Trinidad and Tobago. Initially, there were suggestions, including a suggestion by the UN, that there were 40,000 illegal immigrants or 40,000 Venezuelan refugees, a term that persons like to use very loosely in Trinidad and Tobago. That was around 2017. We first saw this number arise, 2017, 2018, and a suggestion that there were 40,000 Venezuelan refugees in Trinidad and Tobago. As you know, things unfortunately got worse in Venezuela in 2018 into 2019. And if things worsen, you would expect there to be even more migration of persons to Trinidad and Tobago. Your government took a humanitarian decision to have a Venezuelan migrant registration scheme in May into June of 2019. And at that point in time, the government policy that was announced from this very table repeatedly, we would have a 2-week period where all Venezuelans in Trinidad and Tobago, whether you came in legally or illegally, you should come forward and register. And there would be no repercussion to those who had come in illegally once you came to this Venezuelan migration registration process. At the end of that 2-week process, and you all will recall, apart from Tobago, on the last day, a Friday, in Port of Spain at the Oval, there were no lines outside when we had reached the 5 o'clock point. In San Fernando, we were able to ring fence the persons who were there at 5 o'clock and to register everyone into the early hours in the morning. In Tobago, there was a little mix-up. Persons were moved away from the registration process just before. What we did is we then worked through the rest of the weekend to allow those who were there on Friday to register. At the end of that humanitarian process, we registered 16,523 Venezuelans in Trinidad and Tobago. And I repeat, we had made the announcement that anyone, whether you came in legally or illegally from Venezuela, you should come forward and register. That number of 16,523, of course, did not equate to the suggestion in 2017, 2018 of 40,000, which I assume was just an estimate at the time. At the time we were doing this registration process, I met with the heads of the UNHCR and other bodies, and I remember the conversation very vividly at the Parliament building. The Attorney General was one of the persons present, where I made it very clear to the UNHCR that whilst we understood their process of registration, domestically in Trinidad and Tobago, our obligation is to keep our population safe and secure, and we would abide by our domestic laws in Trinidad and Tobago. We would continue to respect the work of the UNHCR, but we also made it clear that by mere holding of a registration form or a receipt that a person had registered with the UNHCR, it would not trump our domestic laws. We also made it clear that if anyone engaged in illegal activity in Trinidad and Tobago, they would face the full brunt of the law, which may include, in the case of an illegal immigrant, deportation, and in some other instances, they may even be incarcerated after being convicted or charged for criminal activity in Trinidad and Tobago. We went a step further with our policy and made it clear, and I'm going to repeat it here again today, even if a person holds a Venezuelan migration registration card, it does not permit you to break the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. And we reserve the right that if a person holds that card and they've broken our laws, the card can be revoked and their legal status based on the possession of that card or their registration to get that card would be revoked, and therefore they become subject to deportation or to being incarcerated. At every step of the way, we followed these policies and the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. When people ask for us to secure the borders, and we have been doing so to the best of our ability at national security in a multi-agency attempt, it will include that when you pick up illegal immigrants, not only from Venezuela, but from anywhere, that you deal with them in accordance with the law. That can mean temporary incarceration at the Immigration Detention Center until we can deport you or otherwise. What has been happening within recent times with respect to illegal immigrants and those from Venezuela, we have been repatriating them in accordance with our domestic law. So persons who are suggesting, and I'll just explain very briefly the UNHCR process. So when persons enter the country, and not only from Venezuela, but from anywhere else, they go and they attempt to register the illegal immigrants at the UNHCR. And what they do is they get a receipt that they've registered in the process. International law, what is supposed to happen is those persons are supposed to be processed by the UNHCR, and if they are found to have legitimate grounds for asylum or refugee status, asylum in particular, they are then placed in some other country that is willing, by the UNHCR, that is willing to take these persons who have now been certified as asylum seekers. It is not plausible, nor is it our policy, in particular in a pandemic. And the law is that when you have things like a pandemic, and it was recently upheld by the Justice Budu Singh decision, that allows for the state to do certain things to protect its population. So when you now have persons who are entering your borders illegally in the state of a pandemic, we need to protect the people. People are calling for border control, border security. When you find illegal immigrants entering, what is it that you expect the state to do? So we started a temporary immigration facility for the quarantining of these persons at the heliport of Trinidad and Tobago to keep them separate from the rest of the population. That is going well. It's been certified by the Ministry of Health, and we've been doing what needs to be done. I'd just like to add as well, the day that we stopped registering Venezuelans back in June 2019, we also invoked a visa requirement procedure. So you now, as a Venezuelan, require additionally a visa to legally enter Trinidad and Tobago. Holding a Venezuelan registration migration card does not allow you to go and come. You need a visa. Even if you have a work permit, you need a visa. It is the same thing like any one of us Trinidadians entering a country like Canada, a country like United States. If we don't have a visa and we enter, we're illegal immigrants, and we will be deported, we can be incarcerated. That was introduced for persons from Venezuela. When the pandemic began and we closed the borders on the 23rd of March, we introduced not only for non-nationals, but now for nationals, it is illegal to enter the border without permission from the Minister of National Security. So you now have 3 domestic laws of Trinidad and Tobago being broken by any illegal immigrant, in particular from Venezuela, entering our borders currently. 1, it is in breach of the Immigration Act. 2, you're entering without a visa. That is also in breach of the Immigration Act. And 3, you're now in breach of our COVID regulations as they've come to be known, because you've come across the border without permission. So the state's policy is very clear in these circumstances. If persons are held in those circumstances, they are detained and then they're repatriated to Venezuela. Recently, some lawyers have thought that it is advisable, and they're entitled to go to court to try and get mixed up in this whole system. And we've actually had some very counterproductive orders and decisions being made, because of course, remember, we're in a global pandemic, we're in a COVID pandemic. It is possible that some of these persons may have tested or may be positive for COVID. So one of the things we began to do is test persons at the heliport. We have had instances, whilst we are attempting to protect the population of Trinidad and Tobago and quarantine persons, of lawyers going to court, the state not being represented because they're being heard ex parte, applications being made, persons being released, and afterwards we get the test results that these persons are positive for COVID. And of course, by now they've gone out in the population. They didn't come in here legally, so there's no proper recording. You don't know where they've gone, etc. So we are doing all that we have to do to minimize these risks to the population, and we will continue to do so. And every step of the way is being done in full conformity of the law. I'm being advised by senior counsel, and I'm also being advised by the immigration officials. Persons are being repatriated. We've had a number of repatriations along with the Venezuelan authorities. A UNHCR registration receipt does not trump the law of Trinidad and Tobago, nor will we allow it to trump the law of Trinidad and Tobago. We have our domestic legislation, and that is what we will continue to use. The fact that we signed a UN charter or treaty in 1967 or thereabouts is not something that we're disregarding. But even in circumstances when you're dealing with a pandemic, persons' constitutional rights as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago can be suspended to allow the state to protect the population, as was upheld recently by Justice Budu Singh and is being upheld in Commonwealth jurisdictions all over the world. So I'd like to put to rest any suggestion that the state is doing anything illegal, that the state is breaching any due process in dealing with these situations, in particular deportation or repatriation. There were no orders or stays granted by the court prior to the repatriation process that were breached. None. And it is going to be by some lawyers who want to make a living out of it, running to court. And I've wondered myself how it is that they're getting instructions from persons who are picked up, taken straight to the heliport, picked up coming in illegally, taken straight to the heliport. How are they giving these lawyers instructions? My legal mind, that bothers me. But nevertheless, the state is doing all that it can to protect the population of Trinidad and Tobago, make sure that we're upholding the domestic laws, and we're not breaching any humanitarian rights, treating people with anything less than proper dignity, etc. But if you want border security, as we should, especially, I remind us, when we're in the middle of a global pandemic, that is COVID-19, these are the steps that must be taken and will continue to be taken by the government of Trinidad and Tobago. The second point I'd like to raise is yesterday I had a press conference. I see Mr. Douglas here. He was in attendance yesterday. And it was to announce some good work by the Immigration Division with respect to passports. You all would recall that there was a public conversation sometime not too long ago that it was taking too long for persons to renew passports, and it was taking months, persons couldn't get appointments, etc. Knock on wood, we've taken certain steps. Again, one of the positives that came out of the COVID pandemic, we upgraded the systems, both hardware and software, at the Immigration Division with respect to all of their database. And now, with respect to passports, we've introduced a new system along with TT Post, where persons can go to TT Post, purchase a tracer pack, I believe it's called a tracker pack, for $25. Take it into immigration. You fill out your application for your renewal of passport. You leave it with immigration. When your passport is completed, immigration puts it into this tracker pack and it's delivered via courier service, TT Post, to your home. So that's one level of efficiency. You're no longer required to come in and collect your passport. The online passport application system is also working quite efficiently at this stage, and persons are getting their, after they make an application for appointment, they are getting in to fulfill that appointment within a 2-week period, and the turnaround time for passports right now is between 5 days to 10 days, so that's another level of efficiency. I was asked in particular to address persons whose passports have expired. The answer is yes, the renewals are taking place, you just have to follow the system. In addition to the online system, we've also introduced a system where alphabetically your surname on certain days, there's a certain number of positions and places that you can go in to a passport office, and you'll be facilitated in accordance with your surname on those specific days. The next step I've asked immigration to move towards is a full online system. So we have to work out the payment side, where you can just apply for passport renewal online, make your payment online, the TT Post packs can be dropped off, and then the passport would be delivered to you. That is where we're moving towards. Also, another positive coming out of COVID is I've begun conversation with the Minister of Works and Transport for when the borders do eventually open, that we need to see if we can make a more efficient immigration system at the airport, move towards biometrics and the use of technology at the airport to make it a more efficient system, and try and do away with the immigration form, the physical form that exists right now. So I'm happy to say that the Immigration Division has moved expeditiously and seem at this stage to have sorted out a lot of the inconveniences that take place with respect to the application for a new passport or the renewal. Now, this is not an invitation to go and flood the system, as it works efficiently, but we are taking the steps to make it a more efficient, more customer-oriented system. So those are the two issues I will ask to deal with today, and I thank you, and at this stage we take some questions.
Thank you, Minister Young. Can I ask that we address questions to Minister Khan first, and then we move to Minister Young after?